Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think really like after kind of exploring this topic more, the only reasonable explanation I heard to avoid seed oils in any like meaningful way was just due to their connection with ultra processed foods, where it's like, I guess if someone's going to use that as a heuristic where I'm going to avoid seed oils because they're bad for whatever reason, they're likely going to avoid a bunch of ultra processed foods because most of those are going to be refined sugars and seed oils or some sort of thing like that. But then you just get to the point of like, why don't you just say I'm going to avoid ultra processed foods or limit them to a degree where I'm like meeting my dietary needs but not exceeding them, and then look at it through that lens. But I mean, I guess people like to gamify stuff, so if they can do it one way,
you're so right. And actually, you know, I love that topic. We actually did a couple of posts on ultra processed food over on My Science recently, because there's no formal definition of what an ultra processed food is versus a processed food. And technically everything we consume is processed to some degree, even produce, even frozen vegetables. Processing is not inherently bad. But colloquially, when we think of ultra processed, we're thinking of things that have added fats and added sugars and added salts and things like that. And yeah, if you look at the proportion, like if you're looking at potato chips, like, you know, yes, they're fried in oil, right? You know, most often because it's cheaper than animal fats and it makes it more accessible. And you know, but it's not the oil itself, right? It's the proportion of your diet that is being, you know, made up of foods that have low nutrient density, right? So they might be high in calories, but they don't have a lot of vitamins and minerals, or they're high in fat, but they don't have good proteins or carbohydrates. And so it's not about the single ingredient, right? So why are we vilifying a single ingredient when instead we should be focusing again on these healthy patterns? And it's also like they're not mutually exclusive, right? You can have a really healthy, balanced, diverse diet and you can go have ice cream or have a bag of chips or have some cookies. Like, you know, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. But again, it becomes this all or nothing phenomenon where it's like, well, we're going to take our pitchforks out and go after linoleic acid when in reality, it has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I find sanity by just looking at all these things as tools, where it's like, you know, like, am I going to sit down and eat a bag of potato chips on a regular basis? Probably not. But like, if I need something that is going to be high calorie, low volume, that's a reasonable tool. In my example, so it's like if I go through an aid station, an ultra marathon, it's like, yeah, I want the potato chip. I don't want to dip the potato in the oil and then the salt. I just want the potato chip. So like, that's obviously an extreme example, but I mean, it just goes to show you like, the other thing too of just like food combinations in general, because I mean people are to some degree probably need to be mindful of the level of ultra processing that they're including if they have a low output lifestyle, to the degree where the way I look at it is like, even if I took a baked potato and sliced it and dipped it in oil and then dipped it in salt and ate that, I would tap out with that scenario way before I did the bag of potato chips. And that's likely something to do with the fiber contents or maybe the water moisture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and that's, you know, it all goes into that nutrient density, right? So if, you know, you're consuming, you know, 1,000 calories and it only weighs 6 ounces versus 1,000 calories and it weighs several pounds, like you're going to be consuming less food, less calories, right? And you know, and that's why, you know, things that have a lot of fiber, have a lot of moisture in them, you know, they give you that sensation of fullness, which is a whole other beef I have with the carnivore diet because it's devoid of fiber, and fiber is super important for all these appetite regulation cues on top of ensuring that you don't develop all sorts of digestive issues. But yeah, it's about the density and the quality of the food itself, less about the individual substances or chemicals or ingredients within the food.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter.